definitely.
Alliance for the Brave, a program that advocates for our active military, veterans, and first responders. Presented by Gear Services Web Design. Alliance for the Brave, serving and empowering those who serve our great country in the line of duty. Tune in, join in, and plug in with us around the globe. Welcome to Alliance for the Brave.
In the air everywhere across America, you're listening to Alliance for the Brave, where we are reuniting our American military and civilian communities, and we're showcasing veterans' involvement in leadership across this great nation. We're all about what we can do to impact America today. I'm Jim Blythe, the U.S. Navy veteran. Joining me, a great friend who helped me start this, Chuck Wright, U.S. Marine veteran.
Hoorah.
Ah, yeah, man.
Absolutely.
And
Good morning.
You flew helicopters.
I flew helicopters.
And I got to tell you, we've got a great guest today who is also a helicopter driver in the Navy. Welcome, Marc Liebman.
Hi, I'm honored to be here.
Listen, it's a blast to always have you on board. So let me tell everybody real quick that Marc Liebman was U.S. Navy captain. You were SAR Rescue pilot in Vietnam. You flew Hookie Tooks. You flew the Big Mothers, right?
Yep.
And then you made it out after how many years?
26.
26.
Well, let's be honest. About 13 of it was active duty, and the rest was reserve. But yes.
Wow. I got to tell you, what's really cool, though, is you're a great author. I got one of your first books, and I remember calling you up and saying, Mark, this is not fiction, this is fact, because I was there on the Oriskany when this happened. And you're laughing, and then you say that, yeah, I had to change a few names to avoid lawsuits. But it was incredible. It brought me back.
I thought you changed the names in the book to protect the guilty.
Also true. I also did it to make sure that I could get it through Uncle Sam's censors. And I will tell you, at a reunion, one of my former commanding officers walked up to me and said, "You blankety blank made me look like a idiot." Actually, I'm not going to use the actual words, but that's what he was. And I looked at him and said, first of all, you need to call me sir, because you didn't make 06. And the second of all, if the shoe fits, you can wear it.
There you go.
I got to tell you, I enjoyed those two books so much. And then you came out with your sales series, and I'm enjoying one of your books. So tell us a little bit about your first two books, real short, and then into the sales series. But where I really want to go is your brand new book. So let's give people a little bit of background about your writing in your books, because they're great.
Okay, so there's a Josh Heyman series, and you can find these books all on Amazon. All you type in is Marc Liebman, and on the Amazon site you'll find them. But anyway, so there's a 7-book series about Josh Heyman. He's a Navy helicopter pilot. It traces his career from his tours in Vietnam till the shores off Korea during an exercise called Team Spirit, which my co-host down on the other end, my Marine, probably has participated in. But anyway, so that's that series. Then I'm a fan of Horatio Hornblower, Aubrey Martin, and Alexander Kent. I grew up reading those books, and my publisher asked me would I be interested in writing an Age of Sail series. So the first two have come out, Raider of the Scottish Coast. The second one is Carronade. It came out in August. Raider of the Scottish Coast wound up being an Amazon bestseller, much to my surprise, but not much strange enough, my publisher's surprise. The third book in the series, called Death of a Lady, will be out sometime this summer. I just delivered it to the publisher 2 weeks ago, and then we'll go through the editing process. He's already saying, look, I need you to change this, change that. And then I started a third series, which I call Counterterrorism series. The hero is, again, an American Navy naval officer and helicopter pilot, but focusing on issues around counterterrorism that very few people, particularly in the intelligence community, do not want to talk about or want to talk about. And so the first one, Flight of the Pawnee, takes place here in North Texas, and Al-Qaeda sends somebody to the United States to kill 10,000 Americans in one attack. He figures out how, and I guarantee you, if you read the book, you will not want to go to a public event in a large stadium that does not have a roof. And then the newest one comes out in 2 days, 3 days. But anyway, the February 2nd, it's called Failure to Fire. Al-Qaeda again sends somebody to the United States to shut down the air transportation system. And so you may or may not want to get on civilian airliners after you read this one.
It is more than a little bit scary how vulnerable our systems are.
Yes, so let me give you a fun thing about this. 2 weeks ago, Federal Express asked formally and publicly of the FAA to allow them to put countermeasure systems on its air freighters to deal with the threats from shoulder-mounted surface-to-air missiles. They're known as man-pads. And it came out of a test in 2004 where DHL and FedEx and one of the airlines participated in this test. They put these systems on these countermeasure systems called DIRCM, which stands for Direct Infrared Countermeasures Systems, on these airplanes, and to see the feasibility. In the end, the airlines walked away. Federal Express was scratching its head. The systems cost a couple $1 million to put in. They weigh about 500 pounds, which is 2 passengers. And on a 3-hour flight on a 150-seat airplane, depending on a few factors, the cost per flight is about 39 cents to 50 cents a passenger. Not a lot. Anyway, so fast forward to 2022, FedEx decides nobody's doing this. There's only one airline in the world that has DIRCM systems on it. That's El Al. And
why was I willing to guess that?
yeah, well, that's a story unto itself. But there have been since 1990 odd, something like 40 attacks of man-pads on commercial aircraft, corporate jets, air freighters, as well as airliners. The two on against the El Al airplanes, the DIR systems, guess what? Worked. Anyway, so FedEx is going to do this. They're going to start on the smaller aircraft, which typically go into some of the places where there aren't a lot of nice people, and ultimately, I suspect the entire FedEx fleet will follow, and it'll make it practical. There'll be the volume. Because every military aircraft has them now, or some flavor of them. When I was flying last helicopters I flew in the Navy, we had the beginnings of DIRCM. We didn't have the laser. We had the decoy and tried to use flashing mirrors to confuse the missile. And the laser ones.
We called it the disco ball.
Yeah, the disco ball, right.
The disco ball.
And you had chaff and flares, and sometimes you could, if the automation worked, it'd be great. Sometimes you had to do it manually. So the laser in the systems actually points at the seeker head of the missile and does one or two things. It either destroys the seeker, which causes the missile to go stupid, or it confuses the seeker because it can't find anything in the brilliant light.
I can see Jim's eyes rolling into the back of his head as we are rapidly turning this into a Tom Clancy novel with all the technical stuff. But I gotta tell a story. You keep bringing up FedEx. Speaking of naval aviators, FedEx was founded by Fred Smith,
Naval aviator.
a Marine.
Correct.
More importantly, Marine. But this is the part of the story I always find funny. He attended Harvard. His MBA thesis was basically the blueprint for creating FedEx.
Correct.
Got a B- on the paper. The notes were very well written, but this concept will never fly.
Yeah. So
I kid you not.
Yeah, no. So let me give you the fun fact. So right after he got his initial funding and was looking for pilots to fly the Falcon 20s, he started going around to naval air stations and Marine Corps air stations looking for guys willing to get out to take a flyer. He couldn't pay a lot. So he was offering $10,000, which was less than the airlines would pay you, but he was offering you a boatload of stock.
Right.
And I was in one of those briefings, and I looked at my best friend, and we looked. He said, "That's a really interesting concept, but $10,000 a year, that's not enough." And we walked away. I have a friend who was one of his original pilots, and by the time because what Smith did is instead of giving bonuses, he just gave stock.
Right.
And so the rest is obviously history. Fred Smith also, once the U.S. walked away from the Naval Air Station at Subic Bay, FedEx was in there within a year until the Chinese offered to build him a facility for free outside Shenzhen. I think it's Shenzhen or Guangzhou. Anyway.
Wow.
Been to both of those cities, by the way. I spent a month in China after I got out of the Marine Corps.
I got to tell you, I'm sitting here between these two guys. I just as soon have myself an Irish coffee and sit back and listen. So I hope you're enjoying it.
Do you have some Irish for my hot coffee?
I'll do it next time.
Oh, man,
I'll do it
tell
next
you.
time.
Teasing me.
In the fabulous part of this, though, you're talking about these modern situations with Al Qaeda, the flight of the Pawnee and the Forgotten. There is so much right now because I go to briefings of cyber terrorism, the briefings that you have helped put together with the American Briefing Series,
National Security Briefing Series here in Dallas.
Yeah, there is so much, and we are so vulnerable, guys. We are so vulnerable.
Yeah, so let me give you a bit of history here because this is fun. We and the committee that's putting together this briefing series, we're actually looking at the second year, and it's been incredibly successful. We get 220 plus people at each one who actually pay to sit and listen to a senior. I'll use the word officer. Sometimes we've had former CIA station chiefs. We've had 4-stars and 3-star admirals and generals, all of whom have had significant national security positions. Anyway, so we're looking at next year, and there's a lot of hot topics. And in a discussion the other day, we were talking about some very sensitive issues, immigration being one, right to vote, and all that kind of good stuff. And I merely pointed out, because the research I've done on Raider of the Scottish Coast, which is the Age of Sail series, is that fact these are not new issues. In the late 1700s, we were dealing with who's a citizen because we had an influx of immigrants. Who gets to vote? Do we allow women to vote? What are the qualifications for men to vote? It just goes on and on and on. And so many of these issues that we are facing today, we have been wrestling with since the birth of this country.
I think these are universal issues.
Correct.
Without a doubt. And one of the things in your sales series that I've enjoyed so much is you're reading about all of these things that they were doing with piracy and basically capturing British ships and selling them. It's amazing. These are things that I never heard of in history.
Yeah, so you have to keep in mind that when the American Revolution broke out, we had the Continental Congress. They didn't have the power to raise taxes. So how do you fund a revolution? They funded the revolution by borrowing from people, literally donations. We sold bonds like we do today. We issued what's called letters of marque to ships or consortiums, business consortiums. And the sole goal of that consortium was to sail out into the Atlantic or the Caribbean and capture British ships, bring them to a friendly port, and sell the ship and cargo. And the Continental Congress would then take a piece of the action, typically 10 to 15%. So you have family fortunes today that were built on privateering, as it's known, which is essentially legalized piracy. And it was so successful that the British government was struggling to be able to resupply its troops in North America and its garrisons on Caribbean islands, because the Continental Navy and the U.S. privateers captured somewhere around 15% of the British merchant fleet. It's an amazing story that nobody knows, and that money went a large way to helping fund the revolution.
So, Mark, one of the things that I've noticed, and you and Jim have obviously had quite a few conversations. So I wanted, okay, real fast, we'll talk about this when we come back from the break. Would you go over again when we come back from our break and talk about, because you're talking about, it sounds like, and I'm trying to follow it and I can't, 3 different series of books. And so let's make sure when we jump, because you're jumping back and forth, and I'm following the Al Qaeda and the ship of sales, but I want to make sure our listeners are, because it's 3 different books, and I love being able to take historical fiction and tell stories.
Roger ball.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I have enjoyed these books. I've got a whole bunch of them piled up that I'm still trying to read. So tell you what, we'll be right back after these words from all of our partners. You're listening to Alliance of the Brave. This is Jim Blythe, Chuck Wright, and we're interviewing Marc Liebman, U.S. Navy captain, author, great guy. Go to marcliebman.com.
mics don't work anymore.
Yeah, we don't hear it.
Okay, but we're still on Facebook. We're
Yeah,
still on
there's
YouTube.
3 different sets of books. I'm sorry, I didn't think that. The Vietnam, which is
No, well, let me
Yeah,
just.
let Mark do this.
Okay.
Well, let's do this when we come back from a break for all of our radio listeners.
well, we got Facebook right now.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay,
so-
we can do this as the practice, the rehearsal.
All right.
Okay, so there's 3 different series. One I call the Josh Heyman series.
Yep.
It traces the career of a young naval officer from Vietnam to off the coast of Korea in 1996, and there's 7 books in that series. So that's what I call the Josh Heyman series. The second series is what I call the counterterrorism, the Derek Almer counterterrorism series. The first book, Flight of the Pawnee, is out, came out a year ago. The second book will be out next week. It's called Failure to Fire. The third series is the Age of Sail series, which I call the Jacinto Age of Sail series, and it focuses on a young Continental Navy officer in the beginning and the career of a Royal Navy officer. And their careers start as mortal enemies. They meet early in the war, become very good friends because they come from very similar backgrounds. And then as their lives and careers crisscross, they go from being enemies to being friends, back to being enemies. So I'm under contract for 7 books in the series. We started out with thinking I'd only write 2 or 3.
Right.
The contract's now 7. The first 2, Raider of the Scottish Coast, is out. Carronade, the second book in the series, is out. The third book, Death of a Lady, should be out sometime this summer.
Cool.
I got to tell you, they're worth reading. They're worth getting. So you can go to Amazon.com and get them, right?
Yes, the easiest place to find them is Amazon.com. Just type my name, Marc Liebman, into the top of the search bar. It's M-A-R-C, not M-A-R-K, and it'll take you right to the site. The Josh Heyman books, the first 2 are also audiobooks now. They're all available as electronic in 4 different electronic formats, and ultimately they'll all be audiobooks, but that process takes a while.
Yep.
Who's doing your voiceover on that? Man, that's got to be a huge deal.
Okay, so my publisher has a deal with Amazon, and if your books hit certain sales numbers, Amazon has an organization or a company that they bought that provides the narrators. You get to pick the narrator,
Right.
And they do it for free, sort of. So I don't have to make the $4,000 investment. What they do is they take 50% of the royalty up until it's paid back. Then they
So this is kind of the Fred Smith, I'll pay you $10,000 in stock deal.
Yeah, but it's not. But in the end, I still get less. My point is that it doesn't cost me anything out
Right.
of pocket,
Right.
and I lose some significant amount of the royalties. So, for those who you want to be authors and have dreams of making a fortune, go find another profession, because the only people who make money in this business are the publishers and the distributors like Amazon. The author or the creator of the intellectual property makes the least amount of money. And even if you self-publish, you will ultimately find that in order to make a lot of money, you will wind up having to go through a distributor.
Right.
So it is what it is, and there's not much you can do about it.
It's kind of the system.
Yes.
But with your books, you're, huh?
Here we go.
All right.
You're listening to Alliance for the Brave, honoring, serving, and empowering those who serve our great country in the line of duty. Today's program is presented by Gear Services Web Design. Learn more about our mission and how you can plug in with us at allianceforthebrave.com. Now, back to the conversation.
Because I noticed the last time the mic completely
Here we
blocked.
go. Hey, we're back and we're talking among ourselves. This has been a fabulous conversation. I hope you enjoyed it on Facebook. Stay with us. I got to tell you, you want to go to Marc, MarcLiebman.com and look up these books. And we were just talking about it. Chuck, you brought this up. Right now, there's 3 kind of series of books. So, Mark, explain the 3 series and what they each entail.
Yeah, so there are 3 different series. There's one I call the Josh Heyman series. It traces the career of a young naval officer from being a lieutenant junior grade and off Vietnam through his career. And the series ends with the Simsher Island incident in 1996. And there's 7 books in the series, and they're all available on Amazon. The first 2 are also available in audiobooks. That's Cherubs 2, Big Mother 40. Ultimately, they'll all be converted. The second series is what I refer to as the Derek Almer Counterterrorism series. The first is Flight of the Pawnee. It came out last January, became an Amazon bestseller. The second book in the series comes out on the 2nd of February, called Failure to Fire. And then the third series is what I call the Jaco Jacinto Age of Sail series. The first book came out in August of 2020. The second book came out in August of 2021, called Carronade. And then the third book, Death of the Lady, will come out sometime this coming summer. And ultimately, it'll be a 7-book series. At least that's what I'm under contract for. All those books are available on Amazon. They're all available in at least 3, sometimes 4 different electronic formats.
Now, you've got the new book that's coming out next week.
Correct.
And that one is, which one again?
Failure to Fire.
Failure to Fire. What's that about?
Okay, so again, it's about an intelligence or issue that the U.S. intelligence community, in fact, the global intelligence community in the free world does not like to talk about. Al-Qaeda sends somebody to the United States, or a team of somebody's, to shut down the U.S. air transportation system. The threat or the weapon of choice is a shoulder-mounted surface-to-air missile. And I'll let you figure out what the rest of this is.
That's a frightening thought. That's why I like my Beechcraft Airways. That's a lot better, quite frankly. One of the things, Chuck, though, that I was telling you about was the amazing amount of detail in this historical series of the sail series. When you're going back to the 1700s, you did an enormous amount of detail research in historical research, and when you're reading that, you go, oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was fascinating because I learned so much that you don't see in history books. And part of the problem is I had to transport myself back into the late 1700s so I could write the scenes from the view of the characters. And so it would be what I call historically correct and operationally correct. And that required a tremendous amount of research. The first draft, I probably spent 60% of my time researching and 40% of the time writing. So you come up with all kinds of interesting tidbits that I've worked into the story. For example, in Raid of the Scottish Coast, I start talking about the Gulf Stream. Why is the Gulf Stream important? Well, you're talking about sailing ships in the Atlantic. It's really important because it's a current that moves 2 to 3 miles an hour through the water, actually 2 or 3 knots through the water. Well, when you're on a sailing ship and you're going against the Gulf Stream and you're making 6 knots, your speed has been cut in half. So what most people don't know is the person who first charted what we now know as the Gulf Stream was based on reports that he collected from American merchant seamen and fishermen, and he plotted it. And the gentleman's name is Benjamin Franklin. And Franklin was at the time the Postmaster General for North America for Royal Mail. He takes this chart, and by the way, if you look up Benjamin Franklin and the Gulf Stream, you can find this in Wikipedia. There's also a bunch of other sources, but Wikipedia actually has a depiction of the original chart. Anyway, he takes it to the Royal Mail, and they say, well, we don't want anything that like this because it really won't help us. It takes it to the Royal Navy, and the Royal Navy says, well, we don't want to use anything based on the musings and descriptions of colonial seamen, and they reject it. In 1778, he takes it to the French when he's negotiating with them in Paris. The French say, mon Dieu, c'est fantastique, and they use it.
Wow. So much history, so much to read about, so much to really enjoy. Marc, I got to tell you, these are great books. Again, go to Marc Liebman, M-A-R-C-L-E-I-B.
L-I-E.
L-I-E-B-M-A-N.com. All right, we're going to be right back after the words from all of our partners. And Chuck, I know you got a lot more to throw in too, because we're going to talk about helicopters.
I'm not sure we've got time on this show.
All right, guys, we're going to be right back. Pour yourself another cup of coffee, put a little Irish whiskey in it, and make your morning great.
We did Team Spirit
Yes.
Go pick up a copy of the Simmersher Island incident, or I'll send one to him and he can give it to you.
Yeah, I was going, okay, why do I know that? But
Okay, so Simmersher Island's in the Kurils.
Right.
So the plot's based around some North Korean generals who are in the drug business with the blessings of Kim Jong-il, which is the predecessor of the current leader. And they lease Simmersher Island, the old subbase in the Kurils, from the Russians to use as a cover for a drug processing facility. They're going to create a, quote, a fishing boat support facility. So what happens, the end of the book is all about team spirit and the North Koreans and how they try to screw with the exercise. And oh, by the way, the hero is the captain of the USS Peleliu, and he's got a MAG on board, MAG Marine Air Group on board.
Okay, well, just so you know, a mag won't fit on the Peleliu. It's not that big, but that was the first ship that I went out on. I was actually at the USS Peleliu, steamed into Peleliu for the 40th anniversary of the battle.
Oh, wow.
And that led to me meeting, so 30 years later, Rick Perry, whose father was at Peleliu,
The former governor
of Texas, goes to the 70th anniversary, and he meets a gentleman named Arlie Bergen, who lives here, used to live here. He's unfortunately passed away. We're losing most of our World War II guys, but he is the mortar man in the show The Pacific.
Yes.
So, I mean, these were all real characters, and The Pacific is based on, it's based on 3, but really on 2, With the Old Breed and A Helmet for My Pillow, 2 of the greatest Marine Corps books ever written.
Yes.
That I have back copies of it. I have a small but growing library that drives my wife crazy. But yeah, interestingly enough, I was on the Peleliu.
Okay, so Peleliu, this is LHA 4 or 5?
5.
5,
It's
yeah.
5.
Yeah, I didn't realize you couldn't put a whole mag on board, but that's okay.
You could you could double the number. Well, we had a composite squadron, so it's a third of a mag. So yeah, we could have doubled. Yeah, you get close enough.
Okay, but the helicopter element is what's on this
Right.
During the ship, which they had UH-1s, they had 46s and 53s. Keep in mind, this is set 96.
Right.
So they didn't have Harriers on board when I wrote this book for obvious reasons. But so Peleliu is the Gator supporting the traditional landing in a team spirit.
And for those listening who don't understand what Gator means, they refer to the amphibs, the ships that the Marines go out on, that the Navy supports as the Gator Navy or the Brown Shoe Navy, because the officers on board ship wear brown shoes instead of black.
Well, the aviators wear brown shoes.
Oh, is it the aviators?
The aviators wear brown shoes, and the surface warfare officers wear black shoes, and that's how they get the black shoe, brown shoe thing.
Ah.
But yeah, the amphibious Navy, known as the Gator Navy, is a very significant thing because the Navy's primary role in warfare is projecting power, which means putting the Marines ashore and resupplying them.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. All right, we're going to have boots in the air in just a second. We go back to our longest feature. Thank you for being with us on Facebook. We hope you're enjoying it. We're going to be telling you more about where we're going and what we're doing and how we're going to improve. So stay with us. We'll be right back after all these words.
Today's program is
One of my
brought to you by Gear Services Web Design. Visit us on Facebook or online at allianceforthebrave.com. And now back to Alliance for the Brave.
All right. Hey, we're back on the air. We're just having too much fun. If you're joining us on Facebook, you're watching all of this. And Chuck, you're having a ball. I'm loving, man. You guys are reliving.
Yeah, reliving the glory days.
I got to say,
Back when we were young and stupid.
You like blue in the coffee. I like Irish whiskey. How about you, Mark?
I'm an orange juice guy. I don't drink coffee.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. All right, let's come back. What I want to kind of talk about is you guys both had military careers. You in the Marine Corps as a pilot, you in the Navy as a pilot. You've made a huge impact when you have come back and what you started doing. In your books, you have an Amazon bestseller book that 4 of them that I thoroughly enjoy. And while you made the statement of you're not getting rich quick doing it, you're having a great time. And
Yeah.
you're really contributing an enormous amount to history and making it fun to read.
And that was one of the comments that I was going to make, and one of the reasons I asked you to delineate the 3 different book series, because one of the things that I found, and I'm a huge fan of historical fiction. You know every author that I've read. You could tell them to me right now. But it is a great way, if you enjoy reading, to learn about history and at the same time be entertained.
Correct.
And it's fun. And now I've got to tell a story since you brought up my ship, the Pelalo. So one of the most famous authors was Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy's first book was The Hunt for Red October, which was the book that, if you don't know the story, Reagan made a quip about it in a press conference, and the book sales exploded. And it's a fascinating book, turned into a huge series, and et cetera, et cetera. But what's interesting, and I found this out later, Tom Clancy would put an intentional mistake in every one of the books that he wrote. And the mistake in The Hunt for Red October is he used the Tarawa as an anti-submarine base for the helicopters. Except the Tarawa floats out of the Pacific, not the Atlantic. And for the most part, the Navy doesn't cross ocean ships unless it's kind of an extreme deal. So the Tarawa wouldn't have been there. But we were on the Tarawa at the time, and the flight surgeon was a friend of mine, Landon Garland. He is a radiologist now in somewhere near Roanoke, Virginia. Shamalama. Landon was a hilarious character, but his dad sent him the book. We had so much fun reading that.
Well, let me tell you something else about Clancy. The Naval Institute was struggling with the manuscript at the time. Mm-hmm. And the reason I know this is because I had written a lot of articles for the Naval Institute publication called Proceedings, which is about issues that the Navy has to deal with, strategy, ships, everything else like this. And I was good friends with, not good friends, Fred and I were talking one day, and he was telling me about what has happened. And they had sent they had a contact who somebody knew Reagan and gave him the manuscript. And the actual original manuscript was horrible.
Really?
It was they had spent a lot of time editing and polishing it before Reagan saw it. And each of Clancy's manuscripts came in that way. They were not well written, but the stories were fabulous. Right. And so after Hunt for Red October, obviously, they did the second one, which was Red Storm Rising, which cost a Navy intelligence officer his career. And I won't get into that. And then he got picked up by a large publishing house. And he would just basically dictate the story, and then somebody else would ghostwrite it for him. And he fessed that up to that at a writer's panel that I was attending to, where I actually got to meet him and talk to him. And in fact, I met Clancy before he passed away at least 2 or 3 times. And he's an interesting character. But he had a lot of friends who work for the Navy, particularly in the submarine community and also the intelligence community, because he lived in Annapolis, which is where a lot of these guys...
Yeah, he was an insurance agent in Annapolis. So all of these guys were these and they'd sit around over coffee talking about all this stuff.
Yep.
Plus, he would read Proceedings. Well, we knew this when I was at basic school.
He also played a board game called Harpoon.
Really?
Wasn't there a story, though, about him that the FBI knocked on his door and said, in one of your manuscript or in your book, you talked about this, and that's highly classified situation. How did you know about that?
Correct.
And he just kind of said, there it was in Jane's fighting ships or something.
Yeah, it was in Jane's, but the Clancy, because he was not a former member of the military and never held a clearance, goes under a different set of rules than any of the 3 of us.
Right.
And the higher your clearance, the stricter the rules are. And so he was, let's put it this way. Had I written or had Chuck written anything in Hunt for Red October, Red Storm Rising, Patriot Games, any one of those, Cardinal in the Kremlin, we would be in jail making big rocks into little rocks right now.
Exactly.
But Clancy was...
He didn't have a security clearance.
He didn't have a security clearance. And because he didn't attest what he learned to any one individual, then he was scot-free.
Yeah. So this is early 1980s. I'm at basic school, 1980 to be exact, and we found out they were sharing a story. It's amazing what America gives away in terms of intelligence. And there was an Airflot, which is the official. You know where I'm going with this. I can see the eyes going, yeah, I can't believe this. So there's another. Proceedings is basically a professional naval officer magazine. And it is, and I said it not to, but generally it is targeted to the officer corps, senior enlisted corps. But think of it as it's the equivalent of a medical review or a legal review or something like that. Anyway, point that I'm driving at is the Air Force or the aviation side has Aviation Week and Space Technology.
You mean aviation leak?
Yes. So true. And there was an Airflot flight that was scheduled from Washington, D.C. to Moscow, and it took off at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and the significance of the time was that the publishing house that did this magazine, the Russians bought they were Aviation Week's single largest customer. They bought 100 copies every month that it came out, or however often it came out.
Weekly.
It was weekly? Wow. And so they could pass it out to their scientists so they could glean information from us. But they didn't care if a single passenger got on that plane. Those 100 copies of Aviation Leak, as you said, in Space Technology, were worth it to them to fly that one flight.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my son runs flight tests for Northrop Grumman, which is a large defense contractor, and he can't talk about things that are in Aviation Week. So I'll see it in Aviation Week, and I'll ask him about it, and all he can say is, "Dad, I can't say that."
Right.
I said, "But it's right here. The Air Force has just released pictures of a B-21 and what the thing's going to look like." And he says, "Yeah, well, that's what they did, but I can't talk about what it looks like."
And we've gone off on this tangent, but one of the things that our listeners will start to learn is that I will bring the tangent back to the point. And the point is that it is very interesting to read what we call historical fiction, although the books you're writing about Al-Qaeda right now are really kind of contemporary, but it's still kind of in that historical fiction. But what you can learn.
Yes, and you can deal with in a novel issues that you can't deal with publicly. That's number one. Number two, you can create plausible scenarios that are realistic and you can talk about it. For example, in Flight of the Pawnee, I was very careful to talk about the chemical weapon, sarin, and its precursors and how you make it at a high level. Not enough so you could actually go into your tub in your house and make sarin, but and some of the issues that you have to deal with when you make it. So what that does is it makes the story much more realistic, and it also makes it much more by realistic, I guess, believable. But it also helps convey the point. And to use the words of one reviewer about Flight of the Pawnee, he said, "I love the story, but the plot is sobering," which is exactly what it was intended to be. Let me bring up one more thing about espionage and aviation leak. So fast forward to 2000, let's say, the beginning of the century. If you look at every Chinese People's Liberation Army, quote, Navy ship today, it looks like a carbon copy of a modern ship. Their new anti-warfare frigates looks like an Arleigh Burke. Their cruisers look like copies of British ships and U.S. ships. I mean, what they have done literally down to the physical design as well as the system design, and it has become the source of a lot of angst because they have stolen, and I use that word stolen deliberately, so much technology because we were gullible enough not to protect our systems or to make it available so other people could see it because, oh, yeah, verily, this is the greatest stuff, and it's going to come back and bite us in the butt.
Well, it already has, guys, because the technology of gene splitting or gene splicing that created COVID came from America, came from our deal here.
Yeah, let's not go there.
I mean, seriously.
We could really go down a rabbit hole with
I
that
know,
one. But yeah, it is. And
it happens.
Yeah, by the way, the fourth book in the counterterrorism series, the third book in the counterterrorism series, is going to be bacteriologically based.
Well,
And I'll say this, and it's fascinating, and I say this because the Clancy books, quite frankly, are now written by somebody else completely, and the storylines have just gotten, and so it's fascinating to find somebody who's kind of picking up that mantle, if you will. But what's interesting about the older Clancy books, how many of them have come true?
Yes.
He predicted flying airliners into, now he targeted in his book, and it was actually a fanatical faction of the Japanese, but it didn't change the fact that they were flying planes into the Pentagon, into Congress, which was the intent of the flight that the Todd Beamer flight. You know, what a great American. And if you don't know the story, this is the guy whose last words when the terrorists let them call. Are we running out of time? Sorry, I'm not paying any attention, Chris. I'm out here doing my own thing, man. I'm in my element.
United 93.
United 93 there. Thank you very much. So, but his last words, because they allowed them to call their families because they were spreading terrorism, and his last words that his wife heard were, "Let's roll."
Yeah.
What an amazing American. It's like, you know what? We're not going to take it anymore, and we know we're going to die, but that's okay.
let me
Yeah,
tell
one
you-
of my mentors was on that flight.
Oh,
Damn.
man.
Yeah. So yeah, I read that and I saw the casualty list, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it was a flag officer, and he's one of the two flag officers did a lot for me in my Navy career. But yeah, it was painful, and I can just imagine him, because he was in his 70s at the time, saying, "Okay, I survived 3 tours in Vietnam. I've got whatever number of carrier landings I've got. I don't give a damn anymore. I've had a good life. We're going to go. We're not going to let this happen."
You know, I tell you what, I want to kind of come back, bring us back, because we're about to go to the break in just a second, and focus on, if you understand history, if you read and understand history, and Mark, you made this point when we were talking before the show, each of the things that you have written about, each of the things have been repeated time and time again. What happened in the Revolutionary War, what you were talking about, Cornwallis.
Yeah, you want me to do this? Do you share
Yeah,
that?
very,
Okay.
very quickly.
Okay, so right now we think we've got these horrendous issues to deal with. Immigration, we have right to vote, we have all these things that people are making a stink about, saying, "My God, we can't let this happen," or this position or that position. And when you look at American history and you go back to the early days of this country, you'll find that in the first, second, and third Congresses of the United States, we passed laws on immigration, on who could come in, what are the qualifications and process to become a citizen. We passed laws on who could vote. In fact, in those days, the vote was based on things other than being born in the United States. We passed laws about who could get educated, who couldn't get educated. So as the society has evolved, we've been dealing with these things ever since then. And I go on, there's a whole long list.
Yeah.
In fact, I do a presentation on 10 of these.
I got to tell you where this is going, guys, is going to be a luncheon meeting we put together where we have a speaking panel. And Mark, you're going to be sitting in the middle of that one, please.
Uh-oh.
All right, so we're going to take a break and come back for our final segment. This has got to be a delightful program. Thank you for Facebook. We're going to have this on our Alliance for the Brave. We're also going to be posting this on our news program, which is the Veterans Impact Show. So we're going to be right back after these words. Thank you for being part of Alliance for the Brave.
I have my I don't want to put this on the air.
Okay. Well, let's not put this on the air. But one thing we can put on the air, and the one thing that was interesting, and anytime they start talking about the sailing ships, I'm not a huge fan of the series, but the first one was the best one, which is not unusual. Thomas Jefferson and the Barbary Pirates. And regardless of what you think of the book, what is critical about that and what a lot of people don't understand, so I appreciate you continuing this message. that we are America. We are protected by two oceans, but the problem is we have to keep the sea lanes open.
We are a maritime nation.
Yes.
And that is one of the primary lessons from the American Revolution, because the United States economy grew by 300% between 1783 and 1800, and is due to foreign trade and being neutral. Jefferson and the Navy had a love-hate relationship. Yep. And in fact, if you read my blog, you'll find out more about this. But anyway, in 1801, 1802, somewhere 30% of the U.S. budget was being paid to Barbary pirates and tribute, yep. which is what led to people saying, look, we could have a Navy for far less than this. Yeah. And we can have an Army for far less than this. So yeah, we are a maritime nation. We are protected by the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, and to the north by the Great Lakes. And obviously Canada is a friendly nation and Mexico is a friendly nation. But it is a unique position in the world. No other major power has that benefit, and it has kept us from being invaded.
Yes.
In fact, the only people who have been were able to invade us were the Brits, and that was twice. Once in 1812, and obviously during the American Revolution, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you though, every time we've gone to war, we have great people who come over here. I love Vietnamese food. I love Italian food. I love French food. So we need to go to war with more of these countries to get their
so
people over here.
Your projection for who we need to go fight next is 100% based on cuisine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Whose food do we want to be bringing in?
I got to tell you, man, you know, God help us with some of those countries.
So the war with Barbary pirates, and a lot of people don't realize this, was the first formally declared war that we entered into. And back to your point about Thomas Jefferson, where are we?
We're good.
Yeah. Back to your point about Thomas Jefferson, he had to recreate the U.S. Navy to fight that war. He had shut down the...
We're running it. Yeah, we're going to do that in the last... Yeah.
Okay, so Jefferson, you talk about accountability for elected officials. So Jefferson violated the Navy Act of 1794, which after the Quasi-War of the French, which was an undeclared war,
that is true.
He downsized the Navy to 3 frigates and 10 coastal vessels.
Right.
And then suddenly he found himself having to fight the Barbary Pirate War. And Jefferson's, and so he had to recreate and reconstitute the Navy. And then as soon as the Barbary Pirates War was over, he then again disestablished the Navy and drew it down, which left us incredibly vulnerable to the predatory practices of the Royal Navy, which was desperate for manpower, and they would stop U.S. ships and sometimes take as much as 25% of the crew.
Yeah,
and that led...
You're listening to Alliance for the Brave, honoring, serving, and empowering those who serve our great country in the line of duty. Today's program is presented by Gear Services Web Design. Learn more about our mission and how you can plug in with us at allianceforthebrave.com. Now, back to the conversation.
All right, guys, we're having too much fun. I want everybody to go to marcliebman.com and take a look at his books. His latest book is coming out next week, and that's going to be an exciting book. I have enjoyed it. You want to know about some of the history of the air war in Vietnam? You want to know that, in fact, there were Navy SEALs and Army Force Recon Marines up in North Vietnam, and you know how they got there?
The Navy brought them there.
The Navy brought them there on Big Mother 40s. And Chuck, we're going to be talking more about some of the other things with you as we go forward. So I want to change this a little bit to tell everybody about. We're changing this program's name. We're changing to the Veterans Impact Show. We're going to be focusing on how veterans impact our community. And you are one of the leading, in my opinion, because you support the Arley Army Golf Tournament. You're on the Texas Veterans Commission Benefits Board. You're vice chair of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We want people to know what veterans are doing across this great nation. We're going to be focusing throughout the state of Texas on things Fort Sam Houston, what's going on down in the Intrepid Center, what's going on in our VA. What are the things that veterans are doing to impact our communities? I want to bring it back. Why? I'm a Vietnam veteran. Mark, you're a Vietnam veteran.
Yep, and Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Tanker Wars.
Yeah, but how did we, as Vietnam veterans, how did we get treated when we came home?
Like crap.
All right, here's what I want to do. I want to have conversations that show that we are bringing everybody back. That's important. How do we bring everybody back and take away some of these things that have happened in the past because they weren't justified? So, Chuck, thank you for being on board. Thank you for becoming my regular co-host now. Thank you for being really the spirit of where we're going.
Yeah, and very much. This is very important to me. You will hear the term every week from now on, Charlie Mike. And Charlie Mike stands for military acronym. There's Sierra Hotel, which is SHOT. Bravo Zulu. We've got all kinds of, the military loves its acronyms, but Charlie Mike is going to be our acronym, and it's continue the mission. What can we do? The number one thing that I think comes out of our military, especially when they're in transition, the number one value add that our military gets is leadership. And we need more leadership. This country, quite frankly, and I don't want to go political, but I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me. We're a little bit adrift in the ocean. We're fighting each other. We're mad at each other. It's like, man, this is the greatest nation, not in the world. And I'm not even going to go down the path
In the history of the world.
Of the great experiment, exactly. There has never been a nation like this, and we'll do shows in the future that'll talk about that, especially around the 4th of July. How incredible. We take for granted the American Revolution, but at that point in time, there was not a single nation in the world, and would not be for another half a century, that was self-governed. So
I got to tell you, guys,
sure what that means.
I'm excited about where we're going. And we're going to be opening up and working with 13 more stations in the state of Texas. Hope to add quite a few more. So I want to say thank you very much. Our sister in Norfolk will be continuing Alliance for the Brave in Norfolk and Jacksonville. We're affiliated with them, but we are now the Veterans Impact Show. We'll have our website up and running. We'll have our Facebook.
This week.
All of that done so that you can join us. So just remember, Veterans Impact Show, veterans with a S, make it plural, because it's all of us together. All of us together.
So is it plural or possessive? We're going to have to discuss that at breakfast.
Okay.
It should be plural and possessive.
There we go.
Well, all right,
The
guys.
writers speak it.
So I want,
Hey, we got an expert.
All right, I want us to close with a prayer. Father, we thank you so much for protecting and watching over our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. Thank you, God, for our first responders and protecting them, and thank you for our veterans as they lead the way around this nation throughout the world to be able to pull us all back together. Thank you, Jesus, for all you do for us. Thank you, Lord God. This we pray in Christ's name today. Amen. Thank you for being part of Alliance for the Brave. Thank you for moving with us over to the Veterans Impact Show. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you. This is Jim Blythe, Chuck Wright with Captain Marc Liebman. We're here for you.